Week 7 of the NFL season is here, and we have more fantasy football start and sit tough decisions that we have to make going into the week. No, we're not going to provide you with a lock like Jamar Chase starting in your starting lineup. We are going to take a deep dive into borderline position players with favorable and unfavorable matchups in order to get the best lineup out there in fantasy football to potentially change your season or continue the strong course you are already on. So, we're going to get into this here on Blitz Fantasy Football right now. What is going on, everybody? My name is Blitz Link, and today we're tackling the start and sit advice. Let's get right into it and start with the quarterback position. And we're going to start with Caleb Williams, who is 3-2 right now for the Chicago Bears. Williams has topped 19 fantasy points in 3 of 5 games this year and only dipped below 16-point mark just once this year. That'll equate to 3 top 10 finishes at the quarterback position. He has utilized his legs at an elite level, despite his efficiency numbers not necessarily proving to be much better than they were last year. Williams is still a little bit volatile in the passing game, but his rushing upside is what has kept him afloat in fantasy football so far this season. He gets the Saints this week, who have been very favorable to quarterbacks this season. They are allowing the second most passing touchdowns, 8th most passing yards per attempt, and the 7th highest success rate per dropback. Caleb Williams is a guy that I'm trying to find a way to get in my lineups this week, whether or not that is as a benching a guy that has a tougher matchup or just finding a way to get him in there. The Saints are a favorable matchup that I think Williams will be able to exploit in the passing game, and we saw what he was able to do against the Dallas Cowboys in a favorable matchup a few weeks back with a good matchup. So I think Caleb Williams' rushing upside holds his floor. QB1, top 5 upside this week against the New Orleans Saints. Our next guy, it is Jared Goff, who actually didn't perform too bad on the road, not failing to go under 16.8 fantasy points against the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. Goff has historically been a little bit worse on the road than he has been at home. This week he goes back home, and life is going to be good once again for the veteran quarterback for the Detroit Lions. Ultimately, Jared Goff is going to be in a great position because once the defense is not healthy, and two, guess what? He is going to put up numbers at home, and it'll be against a Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that has allowed the 10th most passing yards per game, 6th highest success rate per dropback, and the 7th most yards per attempt. Goff's offense is relatively healthy right now. Taylor Decker's still a game time decision, but still has Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Sam Laporta, the whole gang in there. We saw in week 2 his upside when this offense is clicking on all cylinders through 5 touchdown passes in that one. I like Goff and this team that's favored by 5.5 points to win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Goff to have a very nice day in fantasy football. I think he's a great streamer option here in week 7. Our next and last option as a must start is Justin Fields. And Justin Fields is the definition of a boomer bust quarterback right now in fantasy football. Fields has been under 5 points in 2 games while scoring over 25 points in 3 games. He joins Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes as the only quarterbacks to have 3 25-plus point outings here in 2025. He's been using his legs to do it, averaging 47 rushing yards per game and has 3 touchdowns on the ground, while also being a brutal passer in the process. And we've seen how bad of a passer he's been against elite defenses like the Denver Broncos last week alone. Good thing this week he faces the Carolina Panthers, who have been really struggling this season and ranked dead last in pressure rate, which should make life a little bit easier for Justin Fields and company on that Jets offense. Yes, I understand they will be without their star receiver and Garrett Wilson this week, but I think Justin Fields and company on the New York side of things will be able to hold the offensive line up, and Fields' rushing ability should be able to take advantage of this plus matchup against the Carolina Panthers defense. As far as quarterbacks I'm sitting, let's start with the guy he played last week in Bo Nix for the Denver Broncos. Nix has been quite disappointing to open the year for this Denver Broncos team. He's scored more than 20 fantasy points just once in his last 4 games. He's coming off of a pretty brutal 13.4 per point performance against the New York Jets, which has been a pretty favorable matchup for offenses this year. He only has 1 game over 250 yards, and he only has 2 games with multiple passing touchdowns this season. While his rushing ability has kept him afloat, he still ranks quarterback 19 in points per game, while also ranking as some of the worst efficiency metrics in the NFL and accuracy metrics, not elite. Now he gets the Giants defense that is playing with a little bit more momentum. We've seen this team clipped both the Chargers and the Eagles in the last 3 weeks since Dart took over, and they form one of the best pass rushing trios in the NFL between Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter. This team knows how to get after the quarterback, and when Bo Nix is struggling under pressure, he has not been very productive this year in fantasy football. So I'm avoiding Bo Nix this week. I think he is in for a really poor performance, and he is a low end QB2 for me this week. Next guy is Jackson Dart, the guy he's playing against. And Dart gets a brutal matchup against the Denver Broncos, who have really dominated against all quarterbacks this year. The Broncos have not allowed more than 47 rushing yards total on the season on the ground, and Dart's been really good in that mark. He's at least had 54 yards in every game this year and 2 scores. Scored 23.6 points against a tough matchup in Philadelphia last week, but Philadelphia is not as good of a defense as the Denver Broncos. Their pass rush is overwhelming right now. They allow the second fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position, the fewest passing touchdowns. I am avoiding Denver at all costs, unless it is a guy like Patrick Mahomes playing them, even Jalen Hurts. Like those type of must-start quarterbacks are the only ones I trust right now against this Denver Broncos defense, who has been truly elite this year and probably the best defensive unit in the NFL this season. So Jackson Dart, I'm avoiding him this week. The next guy, Danny Dimes, Indiana Jones, whatever you want to call him, he has been an absolute dog this year. He's scored at least 22 fantasy points in 3 of his 6 games this year, ranking as the quarterback 9 overall. His efficiency and EPA marks are off the charts right now. Him and this Indianapolis Colts team are one of the biggest surprises in the NFL to open the season. And this week, though, it's going to be a little bit tougher against a Chargers defense who has only allowed 3 quarterbacks to surpass that 200-yard mark, and Patrick Mahomes is the highest at 258 yards. It is going to be very tough for this team, who is top in the league in yards per attempt allowed, passing yards allowed per game, and success rate per dropback. Jones is going to have to be incredibly efficient, which he has been this year, but he's also struggled on the road as well, which is another note. So I think with Daniel Jones, I am fading him this week. I think he's going to be in for a rough performance against this Los Angeles Chargers defense. As far as running backs, let's get into that position. And we're going to start with Alvin Kamara. And Kamara has been a little bit disappointing this year. He's the RB22 on the season, and Kendre Miller is taking over with more snaps. But I absolutely love the matchup this week against the Chicago Bears. He's still one of the better backs in terms of per touch efficiency right now, creating missed tackles, which is still encouraging, and he is still receiving red zone work and receiving work. So despite less snaps, he's still getting the usage he wants. He hasn't just fell into the end zone since week 1, which has hurt his value. The Bears, though, this week surrendered the 3rd most explosive run rate and rank among the worst in missed tackles this season. So I think with Alvin Kamara, I am trusting the fact against a plus matchup that he can bounce back this week and be a really solid high-end RB2, low-end RB1 this week for the New Orleans Saints, and what should be a very close matchup between those two teams. The next guy is J.K. Dobbins, and J.K. Dobbins had his first bust performance of the season last week against the New York Jets, and a struggling performance from this offense, but this season he's been pretty consistent. 16.2 touches per game and 77.5 total yards per game puts him at the RB21 this year. And he actually sits 6th in the NFL in explosive run rate this season. So that's very encouraging. The Giants this year, while I do like their pass rush, they aren't very good against the run. They've allowed the top 10 marks in rushing yards, explosive run rate, and touchdowns allowed to the running back position this year. While Dobbins isn't necessarily receiving that receiving work that we love to see in PPR formats, he is a great play this week against the Giants defense that naturally struggles against the run. And while I'm fading Bo Nix, I'm not going to fade this crowd game and J.K. Dobbins this week. I think Dobbins is in for a great game against the New York Giants. The final running back I'm starting is Kamani Vidal for the Los Angeles Chargers. I think Vidal proved last week he is the guy with Amarian Hampton out right now. Finished with 21 touches, 138 total yards, a receiving touchdown, finished as the RB9 last week, handled 67% of the snaps and 2/3 of the running back carries. So it's very clear that this is not going to be a 50-50 split between Haskins or Vidal. It is Vidal's backfield, and he is going to be the biggest beneficiary of the work for the Los Angeles Chargers. What was encouraging, he also had a 13.6% explosive run rate against a bad Miami Dolphins defense. So he can cash in when the matchup presents itself, and it will this week against the Indianapolis Colts, who have really struggled against zone runs this season and have allowed a above average explosive run rate on those concepts. And we all know the Chargers and Greg Roman love to run that sort of format this week. So I think Kamani Vidal, if you got him off of waivers, a great play and should be in for a nice day in fantasy football. Tony Pollard's the first running back I'm sitting in. The Tony Pollard train, it's just been frustrating this year. And it got even worse last week where he played under 50% of the snaps and basically lost all of his receiving work. Finished with a 43% snap share, just 12 touches for 47 yards. And he only ran a route on 25% of dropbacks. Now, his efficiency metrics are strong, 14th in yards after contact. And I think that he'll be better down the stretch, but I can't say that he'll be much better this week against the New England Patriots, who are the seventh best defense against opposing running backs in fantasy football this year, and have only allowed 3 total touchdowns the entire season to the running back position. So with Pollard, he's reduced his volume. I think the new coaching staff could get him more looks. I'm interested to see what happens there, but New England Patriots are a brutal matchup for him, and I am not trusting him in any format just yet until I see more from this new coaching staff. Kenneth Walker's the next guy. Another frustrating one here. Walker's absolutely been the better running back of the two in Seattle this year, despite Zach Charbonnet taking the goal line work and a majority of the snaps over the last 2 weeks. It is what it is right now. He's still averaging 77 yards per game since week 4, but he's lost opportunities. So it's like no production fantasy. He looks good in real life. Can you trust him? I don't know. He definitely passes the eye test. He's top 5 in missed tackles forced, but this week I'm fading him just because of the matchup and the lack of usage in general. The Texans allow the 10th fewest points to the running back position, making him a true boomer bust like he's been the past couple weeks. I'm leaning towards that bust trend for Kenneth Walker this week, and I'm avoiding him. I wish they would utilize him more. Maybe they'll trade him to a team that will utilize him more. Probably not since they're winning, but Kenneth Walker, I am fading him this week. And then the Cardinals running back, Donovan Knight and Michael Carter, or Bam Knight, whatever you want to call him, I am fading against the Green Bay Packers this week. It is a true committee. Both guys played 50% of snaps. Carter had more snaps in week 5, and then Donovan Knight played more snaps in week 6 for this group. It is a true split where Carter receives more of that, receiving game work, higher route share work, and then Donovan Knight had more carries and received the goal line work between these two. They haven't really been effective, and unless they fell in the end zone, their production's been pretty bad. I know a lot of people are down bad at the running back position this year. It's not a great week to start them against the Green Bay Packers, who allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to running backs and just 2 total touchdowns. It looks like Kyler Murray is once again going to miss this week. So no Murray. They're going to be relying on a run game against a very tough Packers defense, and I'm going to be fading them this week as much as I can. I don't want them anywhere near my starting lineups. Let's get into the wide receiver position, and we are going to start with Chris Olave, the target monster. Chris Olave, to everybody, he scored at least 12.4 PPR points in 4 of 6 games, including back-to-back solid outings against the Giants and the Patriots. His volume's been outstanding with 21 targets across 2 games, and he had a season-high 98 receiving yards in week 6. It just feels like we're so close to consistent 18-plus point outings from Chris Olave if he starts getting some more down the field targets and some red zone usage for him this week. I think against the Chicago Bears, who have really struggled this season, allowing 5 different pass catchers to top 13.6 fantasy points. This is the week that Chris Olave can break through and have a really nice day in fantasy football. The next guy, Xavier Worthy for the Kansas City Chiefs, should be a very good play this week. A lot of people are going to be focused on Rashee Rice. The Raiders aren't included during this matchup, but Xavier Worthy, who's returned for the last 3 weeks, has either had 100 total yards or scored touchdowns in games and been a consistent fantasy football option for us in our lineups. This week, I really like his upside against the Raiders, who have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to receivers. And they've also ran a ton of zone coverage. Worthy against zone coverage since week 4 has averaged 3.13 yards per route run against single high. And he also has seen a 30% first read share during that usage. So I think Xavier Worthy is going to be in for a monster day. I expect a deep shot or two to Worthy with Rashee Rice back. This Chiefs offense should be very fun to watch this week. And then my final start, it's Ladd McConkey. And I think Ladd McConkey is officially back, and we can no longer worry in fantasy football. He finished as a wide receiver 22 weeks ago, and then he was the wide receiver 6 last week. Over the last 2 weeks, he's had 5 red zone targets, found the end zone twice. His target share has jumped to 19.5% with a 22% first read share, which is very encouraging. And now he gets the Colts, who are allowing the 4th most fantasy points and 7th most receiving yards to slot receivers this year. I'm incredibly encouraged that Ladd McConkey, now with Quentin Johnston out, Keenan Allen dwindling down the stretch here, that he is the most viable option for a team that can't block right now without Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater at the tackle position. So continue to expect strong production from Ladd McConkey. And this is the great buy low period for McConkey before he returns to form over the second half of the season. Let's get into wide receivers to sit, and we're going to start with Tetairoa McMillan, a guy who's been a must-start a lot this year with favorable matchups. I wouldn't consider it a favorable matchup this week against the New York Jets and Sauce Gardner. McMillan relied on touchdowns last week, which he finally scored. He scored twice against Dallas, finished with 17.9 PPR points, but Sauce Gardner is the player that I'm avoiding in this one. He's faced guys like Mike Evans, George Pickens, and held them under 57 yards in coverage. McMillan does have an impressive 22% target share and 43% air yard share, and I do expect them to try to feed him. But without a touchdown, I think his ceiling is a bit capped, and his floor is a little bit more worrisome against Gardner. So I am fading Ted McMillan this week. I'm expecting a bust performance from him here in week 7. The next guy, we're going to go with Devonta Smith against the Minnesota Vikings, who have been blanketing receivers the entire season, except for one long touchdown from DK Metcalf overseas. This Eagles passing game is frustrating. It is what it is right now. He's been a boomer bust all season. He scored over 19 fantasy points in 2 games, but posted single digit points in 4 other games this season. He's only top 5 targets just twice this year, and now he gets that Minnesota defense I just talked about, who has been dominant. They've allowed the 5th fewest yards to slot receivers this year and the 5th fewest PPR points per target to the position. So as long as the Eagles passing game continues to struggle, I am fading Devonta Smith at all costs right now in fantasy football. We're going to go to the other side of the field. Jordan Addison, I am also fading him. I know Quinion Mitchell might miss this game, but Jordan Addison is a guy that I am fading this week. I don't think that Addison's production over the last 2 weeks is a very good trend of how he's going to look the rest of the season. His target share sits at 16%, which is not very enticing, despite averaging 77.5 receiving yards per game. And this week, Philadelphia uses single high coverage on a majority of their snaps. His target share actually decreases against that mark, and his yards per route run go to under 1. So with Jordan Addison, I understand that people are going to want to play him without Quinion Mitchell. Eagles have struggled against receivers. I don't think it's as good of a matchup as people think. I think Jordan Addison is a player that will underperform this week in fantasy football. All right, the next tight end we are starting, it is Harold Fannin Jr. for the Cleveland Browns, and I think Harold Fannin is going to be in for a very nice game. David Njoku looks like he's not trending towards playing this week, and Fannin absolutely took over with Njoku out. He's had 14 targets, 11 receptions, and 94 yards and a touchdown since Gabriel took over as the starting quarterback with a 19.2% target share. The Miami Dolphins are a prime matchup, bottom 10 against tight ends and fantasy points surrendered, with the 4th most receiving yards and yards per reception to the position. Harold Fannin Jr. has been the stash we've been looking forward to having as a starter the entire season at the tight end position. I truly think that he is going to be a strong play this week. I am starting Harold Fannin Jr. wherever I can. The next guy, Dallas Goedert. While I was fading Jordan Addison, I do absolutely love Dallas Goedert, who has been a strong player this season. He carries a 21.3% target share and averaging nearly 50 receiving yards per game, while being one of Jalen Hurts' most trusted options in this passing game. While everybody else has struggled, seems like Goddard has been just fine for this Philadelphia Eagles offense. The Vikings just allowed Njoku and Harold Fannin 2 weeks ago to get 10 catches for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it is a plus matchup. I absolutely love targeting that there. The next tight end, Mason Taylor for the New York Jets. Taylor is going to be in for a nice week here. He's been a tight end 1 2 of the last 3 weeks. Now with Garrett Wilson out, he should receive the same type of treatment this week. He's had a 22.2% target share since week 4, and he's had back-to-back tight end 1 finishes before a dud in London, where the Jets passing game just completely disappeared. 4 different tight ends have already scored 11.9 PPR points against the Panthers this year, and it makes Mason Taylor a great start this week in fantasy football. I absolutely love his upside with no other pass catchers healthy for this New York Jets offense. Tight ends I'm sitting, Juwan Johnson. Let's start with him. Johnson has been a non-factor since the beginning of the season, and it's been very discouraging to see his fall from grace. He had elite target share, elite first read share. Those numbers have absolutely dipped, and he's been held under 20 yards in back-to-back games while competing with Taysom Hill for valuable snaps and goal line touches during the past few weeks. Without that, despite a favorable matchup, I am not trusting Juwan Johnson at all this week in fantasy football. TJ Hawkinson is the next one, and Hawkinson has been very disappointing this year. I understand it has been a little bit inconsistent from the quarterbacks here for the Minnesota Vikings, but I cannot trust TJ Hawkinson right now. Through 6 games, he only has 1 double-digit PPR performance and has yet to surpass 50 receiving yards in a single game this year. He's seen 4 red zone targets, but those turned into just 1 score. And since Jordan Addison's return, his numbers have dipped to 5.5 targets and 39 receiving yards this year. The Eagles have absolutely erased tight ends the entire year, and TJ Hawkinson is a guy that you need to fade this week, or you're going to be left with a dud in your starting lineup. And then the final tight end is Michael Mayer. Similar type of situation to TJ Hawkinson. He is getting a brutal matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, who have dominated tight ends this year and have only allowed one touchdown, which was last week against Sam Laporta. Michael Mayer had a nice week last week against Tennessee, filling in for Brock Bowers. And while he could be a solid streamer with Bowers out, it's really tough to stream him in a tough matchup against Kansas City, where he could be the number one focus of this defense in the pass game with even Jacoby Myers out. So Michael Mayer is a guy that I'm fading. Let's get into defenses and kickers. And defense I like is that Kansas City Chiefs defense. I think against the Raiders, where Geno Smith, 6 interceptions over the last 3 games, should be in for a very nice performance. And then the New England Patriots against a Cam Ward led Tennessee Titans is always a favorable matchup than targeting. Patriots have a really good defense this year, and they should be able to capitalize on that. As far as defenses, I'm sitting. Los Angeles Chargers come to mind. I know I mentioned Daniel Jones, the must sit, but the Chargers are a defense that I'm sitting with how good the Colts have been overall on offense this year. And I think Jonathan Taylor will be in for a nice game. And then the Lions and the Buccaneers. While these two teams are facing off against each other, I think both defenses will struggle. They both have injuries on both their sides. The Bucs defense is a little worse than the Lions, but I think the over will hit in this game. So I'm fading all those guys. As far as kickers go, Michael Badgley has been very nice filling in for the Colts. Should have a nice revenge game against the Los Angeles Chargers. Will Reichard should also be in for a very nice day for the Minnesota Vikings against the Eagles, who have allowed 10 plus points to kickers basically every week this year. And then kickers, I'm sitting Chad Ryland for the Arizona Cardinals. They're going to struggle against the Packers with no Kyler Murray. And then the final one is Jason Myers against the Houston Texans, who have blanketed kickers the entire year. Overall, guys, this is the start and sit guide for week 7. We are hosting a live start and sit Q&A starting at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday night. Make sure you set reminders for that. That is already down in the channel right now. If you need any comments answered, drop them in this video as well. I'm always here to answer any questions you guys have. If you did enjoy this content, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you guys next time on Blitz Fantasy Football.